So they ran out quickly, and he ran after them, and he took out his gun, and he said, give me my stuff back and get out of here. They gave the stuff back. They got out of there, but you know where they went to?
The police station.
The police station. And they filed a report, and this man was arrested.
None of your business, Ushi. None of your business, Michael.
It's the None of Your Business podcast, hosted by Michael and Ushi.
Welcome back, everybody, to another amazing episode of the None of Your Business podcast. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and a big thank you to the Prime Source team for being behind this amazing journey of ours. Peter, first, welcome to our show.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
It's such an honor to have you. And like Ushi said, we feel safer having you in the room. And to be honest, this is the hottest topic now that is in synagogues, in places of prayers. And even when you go to a museum, you look around, you're like, is anybody carrying here? Is anybody here to protect me? In a school especially. I mean, you turn on the news any morning and you'll hear about an unfortunate incident that happens in a school. And going to pray in synagogue, honestly, today's day and age, especially since October 7th, I'm personally nervous. Now, I always tell my friends, I misplace my AirPods on a daily basis. So I'm not sure if I'm a good candidate for a weapon, but you'll have to tell me if you think I am or not. But my history with guns is my Nerf guns. I had a BB gun when I was 14 years old because back then you were able to order anything from a catalog, right?
Exactly.
Remember those? You got your catalog. I forget the names of them, but you could order ninja stars and butterfly knives and nunchucks and BB guns. I had them all under my mattress.
Took a long time to get, though, because you had to send a check to get it.
That's true.
A money order.
Yes,
A money order, correct.
Yes.
Remember those?
Yeah, so
Those
Peter,
were the payphone days.
So I have to tell you, I'm excited for you to be here. Welcome again to our show. We are on the None of Your Business podcast. Please, everybody, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. We are over bar mitzvah, by the way, because we've passed our 13th episode.
Oh, mazel tov.
And thank you. So you're a part of that journey for us and with us. And like I said, this is a hot topic. My friends that are all around me started carrying, and I'll move it to you, Ushi, in your experience and what you're hearing, but I will leave you with this. The one thing that my friends tell me that go through the course, and especially the ones that have learned from you on the legalities of carrying a weapon and the severity of the liability of having a weapon on you, is that if they're praying in a synagogue and God forbid something happens where someone comes in with a weapon and, starts just drawing out his weapon and everybody's scared, you know what my friends who took Peter's class tell me? They say the first person we shoot is Ellie and Ari and Yossi, who didn't take a class, who don't know what they're doing, who are likely to kill others, and then we go after the terrorist. Have you heard that before?
I have heard that. Look, there's been a sea change over the last, this is a generational change, but in the last 5 years, certainly since the pandemic, people's attitudes towards guns has changed. And especially in our communities, in the Northeast, where guns were not so accepted beforehand, they're more widespread, more accepting of people with guns. And now, certainly, normal people, everyday people are applying for gun licenses at unbelievable rates.
Yeah. Well, Peter, I'm one of those guys.
Okay.
And I think you're right. The landscape has completely tilted in the last 3 to 5 years. 10 years ago, somebody who had a gun in their house, it was an anomaly.
Correct.
So what do you need a gun for? What are you doing? It's dangerous. But now, today, it's almost like a necessity. It's almost the opposite. You don't have a gun in your house? Like, do you know what's going on in the world today? And especially since October 7th, that's what really just gave me the indication it's time. It's time. You can't sit here and rely on the government, rely on the local police force. It's great, sure, but every person wants to protect their family. And at that moment, it hit home for me. And I said, it's time. I got to do something about it. So I went and I applied, and I started taking the courses. And I'm happy to say that 8 months later, I now have a concealed carry permit. I have not yet purchased my own gun, which I'm going to hope that you're going to help me out, Peter, to decide what's a good fit for me. But I haven't yet done that. But I got my card. I have my permit. So I'm a step ahead. And a lot of people in my community as well have also taken it upon themselves to get their permits. And you're right, more people in synagogues carrying makes everybody feel safer.
Absolutely.
And I think that this has really become a very hot topic. And this has really been brought to the forefront because of what's going on in the world.
When I met my wife, and I came from Brooklyn with a handgun. And her response was, what are people going to say if they find out that you have a gun? I don't want a gun in our house. You know, people will be shunned. People won't let their kids play in our house. And that was the stigma in the Northeast. And so, yes, I think that that COVID was a big breaking point, right? People looked at the situation and said, I didn't know basic government services could just shut down in the 21st century in the Northeast, right? How could that happen? And so that's one thing. And I was in Israel in January, and I visited a lot of these communities that were targeted, that were victimized by Hamas. And I spoke to people who didn't have guns in their house, who survived. And one guy told us he called the police. He picked up the phone. The lines were down, and there was no one. There was no help. And so people are starting to understand that you are your own first responder. You have no choice. And that all happened at the same time that the Supreme Court reminded us in 2022, in June of 2022, in the Bruin decision, that not only are you your own first responder, but you have a constitutional right to be your own first responder. Because the Supreme Court told us that not only do you have a right to have a gun, you have a right to carry that gun outside the home, and that right is not for hunting or some sporting purpose, but to defend yourself, for self-defense. And so that was a really landmark decision that really opened up gun ownership and gun possession to a broader range of people than had ever had that opportunity before.
So you believe, that's very well articulated, by the way.
Thank
you believe that every single citizen, every common person, the average person, should have a gun lying around their house to protect their family.
I think our country was founded on that principle. And if you look at our country in particular, right, nobody, Native Americans who were here before we got here, but no one else was born here, right? All of us are from people that took great journeys across great oceans or walk great distances to come to this country. We are a selection of the most adventurous, the bravest, the most fearless. And so this is what America is about. And this is our American style. We are the people that didn't stay behind. We are the people that will want to take the chance, leave everything behind and travel across the world. And so our country was kind of founded on this principle. Our founding fathers broke away from a totalitarian government. And the way I say this to people, and the way I say this to judges is, our founding fathers in their infinite wisdom did not give us the constitutional right to possess anything other than one item. We don't have the constitutional right to housing. We don't have a constitutional right to medicine, medical care, to abortions, to not to get political, to wine, to basic necessities, to clothes. The only constitutional right guaranteed, the only item guaranteed under the Constitution of this country is the right to bear arms. And why is that? Because once you have that, then you can maintain your basic freedoms. Then you can get the other things you need. You can get food. You can get shelter. But without that, everything can be taken away from you. And for our founding fathers to have the foresight 250 years ago to say, you know what? There's nothing else. This is the only thing. We're not worried about you having clothing. We're not worried about you having water or food. But the right to defend yourself, the right to the item that is most necessary to protect yourself, that you have a right to have.
Wow. I have to tell you guys, both of you, that over a decade ago, I bought myself a shotgun. And that's easy. And it's just an interesting phenomenon that you can go to a Walmart and buy a shotgun. I didn't go to Walmart. I went to another store, but I got a shotgun to have a protection in my home. I didn't wait for concealed carry to get easier to get. I didn't wait for a situation like October 7th to wake me up. I always wanted to have a protection in my home. I grew up in Brooklyn, by the way, with a guard dog.
Mm-hmm.
We had a trained German Shepherd, and we needed that German Shepherd to protect our home.
What neighborhood?
In Brooklyn, on Avenue I and East 3rd.
My old stomping grounds.
There we go.
Yeah.
So you know that we used to wake up in the morning to burning cars.
Yep.
Okay. I used to travel around to school with brass knuckles, mace, and a butterfly knife in my pocket just to feel confident to make it to the school bus, right? That's the environment that I lived in. So as soon as I had a house on my own, I said, I need to have some sort of protection, and brass knuckles is not going to cut it. So I went out and I got a shotgun. But what makes it interesting is, well, first of all, I have to tell you a quick story. When I went to get the shotgun, I asked the guy behind the counter, I said, what kind of shotgun do you recommend? He said, the one that makes the loudest sound when you cock it. That's the one that scares them off the
warning
most.
sign.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the one that I got. I got the loudest that you can find. And, God forbid I should never have to use it, but it makes a loud noise, loud enough that an intruder would be aware that someone is carrying something. I'm curious, though, what are your thoughts about that? Like, why do I have to have a concealed carry if you're probably going to end up convincing me not to carry it a lot because it's so difficult, which we'll get into later, but rather than just let everybody know today, before you get a concealed carry, go out and get a shotgun and protect your family.
Well, that's a no-brainer.
Oh, okay.
Right?
So you're agreeing with
I'm agreeing with you.
a no-brainer.
That
Everyone should have something.
it's a no-brainer that you're going to have some protection in your house.
Sure.
Okay? You have an obligation to yourself. You have an obligation to your family, and you have an obligation to your neighbors. And my gun makes everyone safer around me. And I feel very strongly about that. And look, there are times where I don't carry for whatever reason. Maybe I want to have a drink with dinner. Maybe I want to be comfortable. I don't want to have to wear a cover garment, whatever the situation is. But on those occasions, I do have a certain amount of guilt that, I'm not fulfilling my responsibility, but hopefully there are other people that are fulfilling their responsibility and keeping me safer when I'm, let's say, falling down on the job.
Interesting. So it's on your mind. You know that it's on your mind.
It's on my mind.
Yeah.
And so, listen, when you have a gun on you, right, you have a different attitude. Maybe you're not going to get into it on the road with someone over a traffic dispute.
As a child, I have to tell you, growing up in Brooklyn, I felt safe not only because we had a German Shepherd that was trained. His name was Popeye, by the way.
Good.
But I also had a dad that carried.
Okay.
And he carried every day. He was an Israeli, and he was in the Israeli army. To him, it was second nature. But he had a really cool, the vest. He had the gun holster on the side, right
Shoulder
by his
holster,
chest. Yeah, the shoulder holster. Exactly. And I'll never forget. It was 2:00 in the morning, and Popeye was barking. And we knew that if he's barking at 2:00 in the morning, something is happening. And we came to the window, and we saw two men trying to break into our house.
Mm-hmm.
And he, Popeye got them he scared them off. But my dad didn't want them to ever come back. So he went out on the street in his velour pajamas. I'll never forget it. I was a young child. And he took out his gun and he made them aware that we are a carrying family. And I have to tell you, I felt comfortable my entire life growing up knowing that I'm in a very bad neighborhood, but I feel safe. So thank you, Abba.
Yeah, I have to tell you, Michael and Peter, it's very sad. It saddens me that it's come to this. And we're now in a position where, it's the right thing to do is to have some type of weapon in your house to fend off some of those people that potentially want to do you harm. I grew up in a very small community. Everybody knew everybody. Nobody locked their doors at night. When you parked your car, you didn't bother if your key was in your pocket or not. You left it there. You left your car running sometimes. Like that's how I grew up. And a lot of people grow up that way. And it's a very naive way to think that this is how it is everywhere. Obviously, there are certain parts that are more dangerous than others. But how did it come to this? How did it get to be where no matter where you go, you're not safe anymore? You're not safe anywhere. Wherever you go, you have to look over your shoulder. And is this the new normal? Is this how it's going to be forever? Are we ever going to get to a point where we can just start trusting each other again?
So I think I have a broad view on this because I've been involved in the criminal justice system for 33 years. Okay, so
Tell us about your background.
Okay, so my background is a kid from Brooklyn, New York City Public Schools. And ultimately, I went to Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh for college, came back to New York for law school. And after law school, I was very privileged to have what I think was the best job in the world. I was appointed as an assistant district attorney in the New York County District Attorney's Office in Manhattan. And it was literally the best job in the world. And I got there in 1991, which was really the height of the crack epidemic of the 1990s. probably we hit the high watermark on homicides right around that point. Citywide, maybe around 89 or 90, but I was close to the peak. And so I came to New York. I came to be a prosecutor. First of all, I grew up in New York. I grew up in Brooklyn. I took the subway to school, took 3 subways to high school.
You hear it in your accent. Very, very discernible.
Yes, it is. I took 3 subways to school, and I saw the scourge of crime in New York. So I felt very excited about being part of the solution. And something great happened, because right after I got there, Giuliani became the president, became the mayor. And when Giuliani became the mayor, law enforcement really changed in a tremendous way, because we went from being reactive and really feeling that we couldn't affect crime to understanding that we were in control. And during the 10 years I was a prosecutor, and I graduated from handling the most mundane crimes, the most minor crimes, to handling homicides, the most serious crimes. And I was part of the gun trafficking unit in the Manhattan DA's office, where we would buy guns undercover in the street and trace them and try to understand how illegal guns were flowing into New York. And we really made a difference. And over the time I was a prosecutor, over those 10 years, crime and homicides, violent crime, and even the most minor crimes went down. And we went from a situation where homeless people were on the street and the window washers would come out to a place where that didn't exist. And then the pendulum swung the other way. And here we are today. But, remember, we're talking about, and I suspect that not only are you younger than we are, you also grew up in a different environment geographically, but you're younger than we are. So I suspect that you grew up maybe during more of the time when law enforcement was having a positive effect. And we grew up before, I grew up in Brooklyn in the 70s when, it was chaotic and police had lost all control. And there was no hope of it. They thought there was no hope of ever gaining control. Now, look, the formula is very simple. A small percentage of people are committing a very large percentage of the crimes. If you throw those people in prison, the crimes go down. They're not out there committing crimes. Do we have the stomach to do that anymore? I'm not sure. We did. It got to a point where we said this is the only option. But at some point, it'll get bad again, and we're going to say that the only option is to start throwing criminals in prison.
I think what you're saying is it's much better than it usused to be. I mean, at least that in terms of a city living,
It is much better, but it's on the backslide again.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you're sad. I'm sad, and I'm sad because I watched the progress we made slipping away because we're now become so liberal or woke, or whatever the language is, that we can't do what we need to do to protect people.
And we're watching it slip back to a time that it was in the 70s
Correct.
and 80s.
And
That's
I find
very nerve-wracking.
I find that sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than hearing on the news about some individual that committed some heinous crime, killed someone, stole from someone, whatever they did. And then you find out that this person was actually incarcerated in the past, was let go under some technicality, under some bail reform rule, and they let him go. And here he is, a repeat offender, did it a second time. Then you find out sometimes that he was actually in jail 3 or 4 times. And he's like, at what point are we going to actually take control here and say enough is enough? Does somebody have to get killed until we actually open our eyes? So, you know what? This person should not be on the streets roaming freely. They should actually be in jail. Like it seems like the system is almost working against us. It's supposed to be there to protect us. But it seems like not only they're not protecting us, but they're actually trying to figure out ways how they can increase the crime, how they can let more people in the streets that clearly don't belong on the streets. And we could talk about maybe there are other routes, whether it's, mental health, and helping them, institutionalizing them, giving them, the therapies that they need. We could talk about that. But let's face it, bulk of what these people are is they're just bad actors. And there needs to be consequences. Every child knows this. Without consequences, everybody does whatever they want. It becomes anarchy. It becomes chaos. What is it about the state of New York? And I'm not a professional. I'm not a legal expert here, but I know enough to know that in New York, we're sort of spearheading this. Maybe some other states as well, but in New York, this is a giant problem. Why is it such a problem here more than it is anywhere else?
It's a great question. I don't know that I have an easy answer, especially because New York City became really the safest large city in the country, and we know how to do it. So it's very hard to explain why we would allow ourselves to start moving back in the direction that we fought so hard to get out of. It doesn't make any sense to me.
What was one of the things Giuliani did? What was one of those notable things that he did that you saw really made an impact?
Okay, so one thing that I found incredible, and I had the privilege of being, and you may have heard this term, CompStat meeting.
No.
CompStat meeting is a meeting where 3 or 4 precinct commanders would be called into a room once a month, and they would basically be asked by the chief about crime in their community. They would want to know, the chief would want to know, okay, you had 3 burglaries this month. Have you solved it? Why not? If you haven't solved it, what are you doing to solve it? And there was accountability. And in that room, at the same time, was the guy who's in charge of the narcotics division for that area, and the guy who's in charge of parole for that area. And so the chief might say to parole, let me ask you something. Did you parole any burglars to this community in the last month or two that we should be looking at? Is that a possibility? And there would be someone taking notes. And a month later, when they came back, there would be real progress, or people would lose their jobs. And there was real accountability. Like a corporation, not like a government. Like, this is the way that government should be run. It was really an incredible idea, and it worked. It worked in an incredible way.
You're running it like a business.
Like a business.
Somebody doesn't do their job, they get fired. And by people having that hang over their head that if I don't do my job, I'm going to get fired, it lights a fire under everybody's butts, and everybody actually does better.
I feel like in New York today, you feel like if you don't do your job properly, you can sue.
Now that you get promoted.
You get promoted.
You
right.
get promoted.
It's like a whole new world. And of course, we're in healthcare every day. We call this stand-up meetings. You have stand-up meetings. You have clinical. You have operations.
Morning meetings. Every facility.
Everybody's there. How are the meals doing? How are the people being treated? And everyone's there.
And each department. Every department sitting on a round table.
ABCs of running an operation.
Sharing information with one another.
It's not being done now? This kind of StatCom? These things
I don't know if it's being done. It certainly doesn't appear that it's being done. And I'm not even convinced that the goal is to reduce crime. I'm not convinced that that's the goal.
Wow.
I see that there is an attitude today. First of all, there's an attitude today that people who are jumping the turnstile are jumping the turnstile because they can't afford it. And what Giuliani said and what Bratton said, the police commissioner, and what the attitude was back then was people who are committing crimes on the subway are not paying for the privilege of going down there to commit the crimes. They're the guys jumping the turnstile. So if we stop guys who are jumping the turnstile, we're going to find them with guns, we're going to find them with knives, and we're going to stop robberies. And what happened? They started arresting all the people that were beating the fare. And guess what? Crime went down. Robberies went down. Violent crime went down. Why? Because the people that were coming onto the subway, not because they were going to work, but because they were going to cause trouble, were not getting onto the subway. So the formula is simple, but we have this attitude today, like I think we misunderstand people's motives. We look at everyone that, okay, they're poor, they're poor, they're put upon. Maybe there are people who are bad actors, and we've lost vision of that. We can't prosecute people who walk into a CVS and steal, right? So now in New York City, CVSs are closing, and there are neighborhoods where they can't get basic items because the CVS is saying, I can't do business in this environment.
Too risky.
It's too risky.
I have friends that work in retail that they tell me that the rule in their chain store is that if someone is stealing, you let them go.
Correct.
You don't go after them. It's too dangerous.
It is dangerous.
It's just interesting. You just let them go.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You don't even call the police.
Look,
you just let it go. You write it off. It's almost like they know. It's like jumping the turnstile.
Right.
They know they can get away with it, which is the mentality that's
Correct.
happening.
It's like a tax write-off.
What should I feel like? A lot of my friends have been telling me that they're anxious going into New York City these days. Now, I'm a big fan of Manhattan. I love the city. I feel like every few blocks is another
By the way,
world.
he travels to New York City on his own, which is another story. I think it's very strange.
Yes, it is odd.
Isn't it a little weird?
Yeah.
He takes a trip with himself to the city, and he takes dinner with himself, and then he walks the streets with himself. Sometimes he'll take his dog with him, PJ. But for the most part, and I always ask him, I said, Michael, like, how do you do that? Like,
I love Manhattan. There's so much to see. There's so many projects going on. There's so many markets. It's beautiful. And it frustrates me that people are, anxious to go to the city. What do I tell them? How do I tell them? Do I tell them to feel comfortable? What's your feeling, knowing the legal side of what's happening?
Right. So, let me ask you this. When you're in the city, do you have to step over homeless people?
yes, all the time.
It depends where I am in the city.
For the most part.
But,
they're there.
They're there, right?
100%.
And
it's sad, but I look away.
And you see people that are talking to themselves and look unstable, wandering around?
All over.
Okay.
I do.
And do you think that gives people the feeling of safety?
No.
Right.
It's
No.
the opposite, right?
Mhm.
So the point is, one of Giuliani's other big ideas was broken windows theory, right? If you walk into a neighborhood and you see graffiti all over the place and you see broken windows, you're going to say to yourself, you know what, this is a bad neighborhood.
It's a red flag.
It's a red flag, right? And people feel less safe, even though maybe they're totally safe, but they feel less safe. If you walk into Manhattan and you see that there's homeless people, that there's lawlessness, that there's people wandering in the middle of the street talking to themselves, you're going to feel less safe. But I'll tell you, I have a bigger problem with Manhattan. And this is also, to me, this is just as bad. Maybe not as dangerous, but just as bad. We have cousins that live in Manhattan. I try not to go to Manhattan so much, but we have cousins that live in Manhattan. Once a year, we go there for Thanksgiving, okay? And we walk back to our car, and maybe it's 9 o'clock at night, and people have put the garbage out for the next day, and the rats are everywhere.
Mm.
And I look at this and I say to myself, people are paying $20,000 a month or more in rent to live here. And this looks like a third world country. Who would pay for the privilege of living like this? So to me, that's another problem. Why does it have to be filthy? And before you answer that rhetorical question, the bottom line of it is that it's not because it's so densely populated. We've dealt with these issues before. It's never been like this before. And so there is a certain level of decay, both in society in general, and we could talk about that, but in Manhattan in particular, and in New York City, that I think makes people uncomfortable.
I definitely understand. I just want to say that I'm, of course, on the other side of your two opinion. I love Manhattan. And I believe if you go to New York City near Central Park and you close your eyes and you take in a big smell, you have a choice. You could either smell the garbage the person put the night before, or you could smell the fresh nuts that are being brewed down the corner. You could smell the flowers, or you could smell the horse manure. It's your,
No, but you're missing
it's up to
something,
you.
Michael.
And I get that.
What he's saying,
Yeah.
and I think what I'm hearing,
And I'm agreeing that
and why I'm resonating with what he's saying
Yeah.
is, New York, the officials, they get away with a lot. You know why? Because it is the greatest city in the world. And it's hard to screw up New York. It's very hard. They're doing a damn good job. They're really trying very hard. But it's an unbelievable place. I mean, people from all over the world come thousands and thousands of miles to come see New York, even for a day or two. Everybody always asks everybody one question. Have you ever been to New York yet? Have you ever been to New York, right? It's an amazing city. And it could be so much better. It could be so much better. But they're just not doing the right things. And this is really a sample of what you see all over the country in all the big cities.
Mhm.
This is the biggest struggle that they have.
I agree.
And they take advantage of the situation because they don't have to try very hard.
Imagine what our friends
And
in
they
LA.
can still charge $20,000 or more. I like the way you slid that in, by the way, or more
Or more.
a month. It's ridiculous, the prices that are out there. There's a guy on TikTok. I don't know if you know, he has a channel. He goes around asking people, hey, you live in New York? How much do you pay for rent? And Steve gives them an answer. And he says, you mind if I see your apartment? And usually people say, yeah, they know who he is, a famous guy. So they say, oh, it's your guy from TikTok. Yeah, sure. Let me show you my apartment. And then you see, it's amazing. These people live in 4x4s. They live in a hole in the wall. Some of these people have like a closet. And in the closet, they have like a bed that goes up against the wall. They take it down. That's how they sleep. They sleep there. They eat there. They go to the bathroom there. And he asks them, how much you pay? Oh, I'm paying $1,400 a month. I'm paying $2,400 a month. I'm talking about smaller than this room. It's like every square inch is so valuable. And in this city, we're letting it get worse and worse and worse. And this is mediocrity at best. We could do so much better. And I love the fact that and this is known that when Giuliani, and I'm not a big fan of Giuliani in general, but you can't take away from him the credit of what he did in the city at the time. He did an amazing job. And we need more of these big cities to follow suit And what you said, accountability. When you have accountability, people fall in line. And when people fall in line, everything is better. Everybody is better for it when people fall in line. So I want to ask you a question. Having said this, again, what I'm saying is in a perfect world, probably never going to happen. Is there any merit? This is going to be, might put you off a little bit, and I apologize in advance, but is there any merit to saying, look, guns are dangerous. Guns are bad. They do bad things. What do you need a gun for? If you have a gun, you're typically doing something bad with it. Is there any type of path where perhaps we should limit guns? Perhaps we should, instead of applying our efforts into getting everybody to get their own, permits so they can carry, and more people that are carrying, the safer. True, it's very one extreme, but other extreme, which I don't know if I'm a fan of, but I hear it, and there are a lot of people that are voicing this. Do you see a path where we limit it instead of expanding on it? Maybe that could be a solution. Like, is there some type of way that can ever work?
I think it's a great question. I think it's a fair question. I think it's a great question. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't discuss it. So let's discuss it, right? So they've done this in other parts of the world. They've done it in England. And what they found out was people are stabbing each other now.
Mhm.
So now they want to limit pointy knives. And I'm not joking. There's really legislation.
Because guns don't kill people. People
Correct,
kill people.
correct.
Right.
So that's 100% correct, right? And so people have been killing people since way before the gun was invented. Okay, so now you've got a couple of problems here in this country, right? Because we talked about the constitutional right. And so I look at it this way. How long have we been fighting this war on drugs in this country?
Forever.
Forever. It's got to be 75 years minimum, right? And my question is, how much have we spent? Have we spent, we've spent billions. Have we spent trillions? I think we've spent trillions, right? And I'm talking about all the people that we thrown in prison and all the law enforcement efforts, trillions of dollars, okay? So are there less drugs today on the street after fighting this war for 75 years than there were 75 years ago?
Give me
No,
2
there's
minutes.
more.
I'll be able to find any
Okay.
drug you want.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how
Correct.
rampant it is.
Correct.
Yeah.
So my point to you is we have 300 million guns in the country. Okay, now we're gonna impose restrictions. Okay, what drugs at least get consumed, right? If we say, okay, no more drugs are coming into this country, at some point they're gonna get consumed. Guns don't get consumed. So now you tell me what happens to the 300 million guns that are already here, and who gets them, and who's responsible for them. And I'll tell you what, if you pass a law tomorrow that says you got to turn in your gun, I'm turning in my gun. He's turning his gun. He's turning in his gun. But let me ask you a question. The guy who just got out of prison that doesn't care about doing any jail time, is he turning in his gun? So to me, these gun control laws select for the people that are willing to follow the law. And the people that are not willing to follow the law, they're the ones who are going to say, you know what? I don't care about going to prison. I just got out of prison last week. I'm not turning in my gun.
That's a great answer.
Peter, you literally answered the question spot on. I feel like you answered my question. I am now going to be the voice of that ship has sailed. We can no longer go in the model of let's try to control it. Let's limit it. Nobody should have a gun because that ship has sailed. We're past that. You're right. There are millions, hundreds of millions of ammunition that's already in the streets.
Correct.
In the possession of people that shouldn't have them. And I'll turn mine in. We're law-abiding citizens for the most part. Stefan, not so much. He's a little more risque. But for most of us, the other guys are not turning their weapons in so fast. So right now, we have to fight fire with fire. That's what we're up to, it sounds like. Was that what you're saying?
I don't think you have a choice. I've never heard anyone give me an alternative. I'm willing to listen. As I said, I've been in this business for 33 years. I've been on both sides of law enforcement. And if someone came to me and said, you know what, I've got a better mousetrap. I've got an idea. We're gonna save lives. But everyone's idea always relies on nonsense. The fact is, show me something that works.
Yeah.
Show me a place where it works.
Let's go with this for a second, guys. But there's a challenge that exists, especially living in New York, right? Where New York and New Jersey are so close to one another. And I'd like to ask you from a technical and a legal standpoint, what are we to do? What are we supposed to do? So we have a concealed carry, and I have a store in Queens, which this is a true story that happened to someone I know. And 3 people come in and they rob the guy. to his face with knives. And the guy doesn't know what to do. He's scared. He has a gun on him, but he just doesn't want to take it out at that moment. There's 3-on-1.
What's he waiting for?
Well, because his life has not been threatened yet.
There's 3 guys with knives robbing him.
Yeah. He's not taking out his gun because it's scary. And he'll tell you the problem in New York with taking out your gun. Hence the story I'm about to tell you. So they ran out quickly, and he ran after them, and he took out his gun, and he said, give me my stuff back and get out of here. They gave the stuff back. They got out of there. But you know where they went to?
The police station.
The police station. And they filed a report, and this man was arrested.
Stop it.
Real true story. Peter, don't tell me you never heard these type of stories before.
I'm on the front lines of this. Okay, this is what I deal with on a
How are we supposed to deal with this? You just convinced me.
You're saying that story is actually viable? That can actually happen?
I'm telling you that it's not only viable, it's probable. I could predict where that story was going. So I have a guy, by the way, you don't understand. This is my day to day.
So, you give me a concealed carry, you can go to New York, but be careful traveling through New Jersey. You can't go to Times Square. If you're threatened and you pull it out, you're going to get arrested. What is happening?
Right.
Please explain to us.
Right.
So even if you have a gun, they're not even letting you use it.
Well, it's worse than that, right? So New York, and, the term threat to democracy is a term that's thrown around a lot these days. And
Loosely, yeah.
And to me, there is a big threat to democracy in this, which is that we have these institutions which have stood the test of time. And the Supreme Court in 2022 told New York, you have to honor people's constitutional right to keep and bear arms. You have to give people license to carry guns. And you know what New York said? Oh, you're telling us we have to give people a license to carry guns? We're going to make it so that they can't carry it anyplace. And we're going to limit where they can carry it. So now it's working its way through the courts now, and there's a lot of litigation. And most of what New York passed has been stayed by different federal judges. But in the interim, you have New York saying, okay, you're telling us that we have to give people gun licenses. You're telling us we have to let them carry it in all these various places. Fine, we're going to make sure that if they use it, they're never going to see the light of day again. And so you have these bodega owners. If you read the New York Post, these bodega owners who are fearing for their lives, who are defending themselves and defending their stores, are getting thrown in Rikers Island for defending their lives. I was on my way to, I go on a lot of podcasts. I don't know why. This is my Latin life.
You're a podcast junkie.
I was on my way to a podcast this past Thursday night. Okay, 8:00 at night.
How are we doing so far?
And I'm having a great time.
Okay. I love that. Appreciate that.
So it turns out that my answering service calls me. It's 8:00 at night. I have a guy on the phone. She tells me that he's in lockup in the 72nd precinct in Brooklyn. And he discharged his weapon. Okay, so I get him on the phone. What happened? He owns a jewelry store, and he had an employee there. Employee has some mental issues, but he's been with him for a long time. They ended up in a dispute. The guy picks up a chair, and it's on video. Picks up a chair and lunges at him with the chair over his head. And he pulled out a gun, and he said, I didn't want to shoot the guy. So I just turned a little bit, shot into the refrigerator, and you could see, it's all on video. The person with the chair over his head drops the chair immediately and puts his hands over his ears. So this is a hero. I mean, he saved his own life and didn't have to take this guy's life. So the cops didn't know what to do. It's New York City, and big meeting and supervisors, and they said, look, you discharged your weapon. We got to arrest you. Now, arrest for what? He didn't do anything wrong. He had a license to carry the gun.
He was in a dangerous situation.
He was in his own store. You could even see him at one point when the guy picks up a chair, he takes a step back, and the guy lunges at him.
That's so backwards.
And this was, by the way, this is not a long time ago. This is this past Thursday. This was my Thursday night, and Friday was spent dealing with this guy. He was in jail 30 hours awaiting seeing a judge or an arraignment. Yeah, we saw a judge Friday, maybe 6:00 at night, and he was released on his own recognizance. But 30 hours in jail? What's the message, right? Do you want to spend 30 hours in jail? Do I want to spend 30 hours in jail? No. By the way, there's plenty of people 30 hours in jail. 30 hours in jail. I could do it on one toe. I do 30 hours of jail like that. But for a guy like this who applied for his license, waited a year to get it, went through the background checks and the training, put him in jail for 30 hours? For what?
He should get a reward.
He should get a reward.
This guy should get a reward.
And he did everything right. And in my opinion, even more than he did everything right. Really a hero who thought fast. He did everything right. He tried to retreat when he could, and when he couldn't retreat, he still didn't resort to deadly force.
Let me ask you something. This guy that you dealt with Thursday night, all of these officials, be it the judge that was involved, be it the police officer that was arresting him, all the people that were involved in this, do any of them feel good about what has been happening and what they've been a part of? Does any of them feel, are they all oblivious to how the rest of us see this story, the public sees the story? Or are there really people involved in this that actually say, oh, yeah, this is the way it should go down? Yeah, this guy discharged his firearm. He should actually go to jail for 30 hours. Is there anybody in the world that's involved in this that would say that?
It's a good question.
Because if there isn't,
right.
I'd like to know, why is this still happening?
I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
He did take a shot.
He took a shot into the refrigerator. No one got hurt.
No, I get that. But I'm saying there are stories that I've confirmed that where people have not taken it.
Correct.
Just discharging the weapon gets you arrested.
Correct.
In New York City
100%.
today, right?
Correct.
That's the challenge.
Right.
So people shouldn't think, oh, he shot the gun.
It's not
so
normal.
It's
not. It's insane.
If you just take out your gun, you're automatically getting arrested. And Ushi has a great question. And I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
But I'm going to give you another example. I'm going to answer your question with another example, okay? It's such a great question because I just dealt with this today, okay? This is my everyday, okay? So I have a guy. Two guys in the back of a car. They had licenses. This is going back now probably 6 years. They had licenses from the state of Massachusetts. They came to, this is before Bruin. They came to Manhattan. They had the guns with Massachusetts licenses. Massachusetts license is not a Texas license. It's very hard to get. And they were stopped for a routine. The cop said they passed a red light. There were 5 of them in the car. So everyone got pulled out. Everyone got patted down. Why? It was not appropriate. So this guy who I'm representing now, I did not represent back 6 years ago. I represented the other guy in the back of a car with a gun. He was represented by a free attorney. And he was a combat veteran. He was in Afghanistan. He was in the military. He's a disabled veteran. And when I dealt with this case, and remember this was in Manhattan, and that's my old office, my old boss who I was working with on this case, he said to me, Peter, I want you to be ready for what's going to happen. Okay? This guy's a combat veteran. Carries a lot of weight around. He's going to do a lot better than your client. And now going back to before Bruin, it was a mandatory minimum of 3.5 years in prison if you had an illegal gun, and the Massachusetts license didn't count. So they're telling these guys, look, take 2 years in prison, or you're going, or we'll send you to prison for 5 or more, maximum of 15. So anyway, this guy gets an opportunity. The combat veteran gets an opportunity to plead guilty for probation, and he pleads guilty. My guy, who I have so much respect for because he had such guts to do, he said, you know what? These guys violated my rights. I'm challenging this case. And we ended up doing, and they threatened him numerous times that you're going to be in prison. And we ended up doing a 5-day suppression hearing. Judge Juan Merchan, you may have heard that name. He's been in the news a lot.
Mm-hmm. Once or twice.
And he denied our motion to suppress the gun. Unanimously reversed by the appellate division. And about 3 years after the arrest, my client was exonerated and the indictment was dismissed. He violated his right. Now, the combat veteran calls me up and said, can you do the same thing for me? And I said, I don't know. Let me try. And so today I was dealing with this case because this is still going on. We made a motion to dismiss his indictment. Now, the appellate court ruled that the entire car stop was unconstitutional. These guys should have never been stopped, should have never been searched. And now you also have Bruin, which says, look, these guys had a constitutional right to have the gun anyway. So there's a lot of grounds why, and not the guy's done with his probation. It's over. It's not about that. Should he be a convicted felon for the rest of his life?
Sure, he wants to clean his record.
He wants to clean his record. And so what I'm hearing from the prosecutor's office, and we're going to meet with the judge about this, is, look, we agree that the right thing to do is his indictment should be dismissed. We don't see a legal path to do it. He already pled guilty. He didn't challenge this. we don't see a legal path. And my response is going to be when we meet with the judge on this next week. I didn't go to law school to do the wrong thing because the law mandates it.
So
We have to get out of this mindset, right? And that was a long-winded answer to your question. But there were so many people stuck in the orthodoxy, the fact that,
they're purists. They're
yeah,
like,
right.
it's all about what the law says.
Right.
There's no common sense anymore.
Now, at the same time, you have to be careful because I am criticizing New York because I feel New York is not complying with the Bruin decision. And I talk about threat to democracy, and I say this is a threat to democracy. If you have the highest court in the country, the Supreme Court, saying this is the law, and you say, okay, we're going to not follow the law, then to me, that is a threat to democracy.
Sure.
Okay? You have to respect these institutions. So the law is important. I'm a lawyer. I'm not suggesting we should break the law. But what I'm saying is we are experienced. We are knowledgeable. And I refuse to believe that the law doesn't make any allowance for a situation like this where everyone in the room, the prosecutor, the defense attorney, and the judge agree what the right thing is. And but we're going to do the wrong thing because we believe the law says we have to.
You're saying it so well. By the way, I want you to run for office one day, and we will support you back here. Okay? You're going to have, because you really are making sense that you're not getting stuck in the mud with this is how it has to be, this is how it's always been. Like, you're willing to actually open your mind and really break it down and see what's fair, what's right, what's really the right thing to do, right? And you got to protect the law. There has to be integrity, of course. There's always got to be rules, but not to the point where it's hurting people. The rules are meant to help us. If it's hurting us, then there's something wrong here with the whole picture. But let me tell you something. I remember this. I saw this clip. I'll never forget it. And I saw this clip probably 3-4 years ago, and I still remember it till today. I'm a big fan of Tucker Carlson. I'm a big fan of his. I like the way he thinks. I like his style, and I especially like his delivery. I like the way
he's good.
I like the way he gives.
I like
over.
the way he looks at people.
Yeah.
Like, he looks at them like, could you possibly be this stupid?
Exactly. He's very quick on his feet.
Yes.
Very quick on his
Yes.
feet. You cannot debate him. So in any case, he's interviewing this guy, Eric Swalwell, who's a Democrat.
I know the guy.
Okay, you know? Okay.
I don't know him personally, but I know of him.
Okay, yeah. So he's interviewing him, and they're talking about this very issue, about guns, the rights to bear arms, right? And Eric Swalwell was telling Tucker, Tucker, let's be honest. Why do you need a gun? Call the police if there's a problem. Why do you really need a gun? He says, I don't understand. He says, you don't need a gun because you walked into my office today with security guards who are holding guns. So you have people to protect you, and that's easy for you to tell me not to have guns to protect myself. He said, Tucker, you worried people are after you, and I'm a public figure. I need to have people protecting me with guns. He said, wait, you think your life is more important than mine? You think you have more of a right to protect your family more than I have a right to protect mine? And, for a second, like, Eric looked like, wait a second, that was probably a bad argument that I made, because he's right. My life is not any more important than his is, right? So we should all have that God-given right. We should all be able to defend what's most important to us, which is our families. It comes before anybody else. It's be killed or kill, right? We're gonna do what we have to do, 100%. But I'll say this: unfortunately, this is the society that we live in, and we have to adapt, and we got to do things. But tell me, what are the 3 states that have the most restrictive gun laws in the country? I imagine New York is in the top 3. What are the other 2?
I would put New York up there.
New York is for sure up there.
For sure. And I can't say that I know the laws so well in other states, but I would think that California would be up there.
I would imagine.
Hawaii, believe it or not,
really
would have to be up
Hawaii.
there. Hawaii.
I think of Hawaii as this.
Like there's no crime in Hawaii.
Exactly.
Right.
Everybody's at the beach drinking daiquiris, and that's it.
I'm very anti-gun there. Massachusetts also.
Stop right there.
Yeah.
Let's say those 3.
Okay.
Let's say New York, California, and Massachusetts. I imagine that those 3 states are probably also leading the country in crime. I would imagine that they also have the most crimes, the most shootings, the most murders. Is there some type of connection there? Like, can we take some type of deduction from that and look at now the 3 safest states in the country? Let's look at the 3 safest states and see what are their gun laws. Shouldn't that tell us something?
I think it tells us an awful lot. And there's a book out there that's been out there for some time. It's called, and I think the title is self-explanatory, by Professor John Lott, More Guns, Less Crime. and he did a deep dive on statistics about this, and he claims exactly that the more guns extant in an area, the less crime there's going to be.
Yeah, it's basic math. Think about it. If the bad guys already are getting guns, they're going to get one regardless because they want to do stuff with it. So if you have more good guys who are going to do only good things with guns, they're not going to shoot people randomly. They're only going to do when they need to. Then also you're evening out, you're leveling the playing field right now. So the more guns you have is actually quite better. And this was for me that eye-opening moment when I decided, you know what? All of us, I thought about, God forbid, those Jews, not just Jews. It wasn't even just Jews October 7th. There was Jews, non-Jews, there was Arabs, there was other nationalities, there was and they were just being mowed down one by one. They were just being picked off. And this is in Israel, where they probably have more guns in Israel than they do in many other countries. Actually,
yes and no, but
not even so much.
Surprisingly, private ownership of guns is very difficult depending on where you live.
In Israel?
This is an unknown thing.
In Israel, this is unknown.
Really?
And private ownership of long guns is impossible. There's no private ownership of long guns.
Are you telling me that Israel
has gun control?
Like New York style gun control?
Worse.
Very difficult.
But you have to remember the most Israelis serve in the army, so they end up being able to carry.
Because most people there are drafted into the army.
Well, but this is a recent change, and it was only up until very recently that, first of all, being in the army didn't mean anything. You had to be you had to get to a certain rank in the army. Now they're lowering their standards because you have a government that's more right wing, and they saw what happened. So now they're opening it up a little bit. But it used to be that being in the army meant nothing because otherwise everyone could have a gun. I had the privilege of having lunch with a police commander in Israel a couple of years back, and definitely pre-October 7th. And he was explaining to me how difficult it was. This was in Petah Tikva in the middle of Israel. It wasn't, in the West Bank. Now, if you live on the other side of the Green Line, if you live really on the other side of the Green Line, then you can get guns, handguns. But like those Gaza communities were considered safe. They couldn't get guns, and there was no civilian ownership of rifles. You have people coming with RPGs and AK-47s, and you're shooting at them with your Glock. It's not the same thing.
Wow.
I have to ask you a quick question. We're going to have to wrap up soon, and I'm having such a great time.
Maybe you'll have me back.
I was going to say I'm inviting you back already for another episode because there's so much to talk about from the legal standpoint, the technical standpoint, which I want to jump into real quick because Ushi started asking about different states. This applies to all the Jews that live on the East Coast. We're all friends with people from Lakewood, from Muncie, from the Five Towns to Brooklyn. What happens? What are those rules that we need to know? Can you tell us and just educate us? If I'm living in the 5 boroughs and I'm going to visit my friend in Lakewood, New Jersey, or I'm going to visit my friend in Muncie and I have to pass through Teaneck in order to get to him, what are the current laws today? What am I allowed to do? And is there any way around it? Is there any way that you can help our listeners figure out ways that I can carry when I visit my uncle in another town, even though I'm passing through another state?
Right. So this is a great question. Okay. And this is a whole show. This question could take up a whole show, but we're not going to do that. So we're going to talk very quick. There is something called that every gun owner should be aware of. It was a Reagan creation. It shows you how old it is. It's called the Firearm Owners Protection Act. And one of the fundamental principles in the Firearm Owners Protection Act is that you can drive through a state with a gun from one place where you can legally possess it to another place you can legally possess it. Now, there's a lot of rules involving this. One of them is the gun has to be locked, unloaded, separate from the ammunition in the trunk of the vehicle. You can't make any deviations from your trip, really. In other words, if you are going from Florida to Vermont, where 2 places where you don't even need a license to possess a gun, and you have a handgun, you're not going to stop in New York on that trip, right? You're not going to stay overnight in a hotel in New York. You would maybe stay in New Hampshire. You would maybe stay someplace else. You're not going to stay in New York. New York and New Jersey, you need a handgun license to possess. Well, okay. New York, you need a handgun license. You can't touch a handgun in New York State unless you have a license for that handgun. That means you can't go to a gun store. You can't shoot at a range unless you have a handgun license. Very strict, and it's a very serious felony to possess a handgun without a handgun license. There's a lot of rules, right? So what we have in New York is I developed, it's going back right to around the time of the pandemic. We're about 4 years old, a prepaid legal plan for gun owners in New York. It's called New York Tax Defense, NY Tax Defense, NYTACDefense.com. And what it is you pay my firm $32 a month, and the principal benefit is that if you're involved in a self-defense incident, and this guy who called me last Thursday night, he was part of the program. So we jumped into action, and he's represented for free. He's already prepaid. For $32 a month, it's a bargain. And we will defend you up to $250,000 of criminal defense representation for free. But there's another huge benefit in New York, because how many people are going to be involved in self-defense incidents? The other big benefit is that you have my firm behind you. And this is what we do. And so if you have these kinds of questions, if you want to know, hey, I'm going to my brother-in-law's house, what can I do? Can I carry there? I have to drive through Times Square.
How much is it a month?
It starts at $32 a month.
You have $32 so I can get the answer?
For the-
Because I have
for the-
friends who want to visit me from Brooklyn, and they're asking me, we're coming to New York.
Seems like a very fair price
By the way,
for what they're getting.
Great program, and I have friends, I believe, that are part of
I think
your
that's
program.
right. Correct.
And good for them, because they know now that, again, they're more confident, and especially they're learning all the proper rules
Correct.
with you. And I want to just say this
So
very,
is
very
the question, though, you're asking me they're coming from Brooklyn?
Let's make a clear,
Yeah.
exactly. Someone from Brooklyn is coming to visit me in Muncie. They're both New York State, but they're passing through Teaneck in order to get here.
No problem.
They're allowed to pass
No
through
problem.
New Jersey.
They're allowed to pass New
Can they
Jersey?
stop in New Jersey for lunch?
So, no. The answer would be no.
So they can only transport it.
Correct.
I see. So they can't make a stop.
Locked, unloaded, separate from the ammunition through New Jersey.
What did you mean by, you mentioned in there that Florida and in Vermont, you don't need a license for a gun. What did you mean by that?
Okay, in most states now, and this is a trend, so now we've reached the majority. I think it's like maybe 27 states right now have what they call constitutional carry. If you're an adult male over the age of 21 or over, then you have a constitutional right to carry a gun in public without a license.
You're kidding me.
No.
What? Did
Yeah.
you know this?
Yeah, I did know this. I
Okay.
actually took the
And
course.
by the way, did you hear about all the crime that's going on? You can get a gun. You don't need a license. You can walk around with it in Florida. In
And we're
Arizona.
functioning society.
Right.
Believe
Yeah,
it or
right.
not. People are actually
Right.
getting along.
So the fact that you didn't hear about it speaks volume.
It really does.
Because believe me, if it was bad,
I would have known about it.
you would have known about
And
it.
somebody would have said, we gotta institute licenses.
Right, exactly.
But it's workers. You tell me that literally in Florida, I can go to a gun store. I'm an adult. I can
You
buy a gun.
You can't.
Oh, I'm not a resident.
Right.
A resident of Florida,
Florida, correct.
couldn't buy a gun,
And carry it around.
a handgun,
A handgun.
a Glock.
A Glock.
You're kidding. You are kidding me.
No, I'm not.
So one second. Are you telling me that New York is a different country than Florida? How is it possible that in the same country there can be such a vast difference?
I've said this for years and years, the cultural differences between Texas and New York. I mean, I think that we have more cultural similarities with London and New York across the Atlantic Ocean than we do with Texas and New York.
What's up with that?
It's
Our
unbelievable.
system.
And by the way, it's on one hand, it's a beautiful country and it's beautiful. And I love going down south for this reason. On the other hand, it's unbelievable. And we have a lawsuit going on right now against the NYPD. And we have against their licensing division. And one of our contentions, there's a couple of different aspects of this lawsuit, is that they have to, by law, by the Constitution of the United States, accept the gun licenses of other states. That basically, if you're licensed in New Jersey, in Texas, in Massachusetts, wherever, they should be required to ask a federal judge to order them to accept those licenses. They accept the the driver's licenses from every other state.
They do.
And
exactly.
if you're a resident from London and have a London driver's license and you're driving around New York and you show it to a cop, you're here on vacation, you're not getting a ticket, right? But a gun license, and this is a constitutional right, they will not accept.
I wish you luck on that lawsuit, by the way.
Thank
Let
you.
us
I
know how
appreciate
that
that.
goes.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And we couldn't agree more. I mean, if it works in one state, it should work in the other states as well. It's all part of the same country at the end of the day. But, there's so many of these types of things that really goes on that makes no sense. And, it is what it is. This is the way it's always been done. But there are people like you who stand up for people like me. And, thank God that we
Yeah, I
have.
was about to say, I thank you on behalf of our communities for helping us feel safer. And it's just, it feels good to have you with us and educating us.
Yeah, but when you're not busy with guns and criminals, what do you like to do? What do you do typically what's your hobby outside of what we just talked about today?
So I am very involved in community security and synagogue security.
Oh, really?
I spend a lot of time on that. But also I have a nice family. I have a new granddaughter who I spend a lot of time.
Mazel tov.
And thank you.
Nothing like it, huh?
Yeah, and so the family keeps me very busy.
Does your granddaughter carry?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. But she's already been to the range. She's 6 months old.
Yeah.
Peter, we have something that we like to do, a tradition on our None of Your Business podcast. Before we let you go, we ask you to think of a guest that would be a select guest that you think would add value to our growth of our podcast, which we're trying to do here in general is grow personally and professionally. Who do you think would be a good guest that you can ask that's in your Rolodex that you say, you know what, this would be a good person to go on your podcast?
Okay, so I'll tell you, there's a very, very interesting guy. He's a good friend of mine. And I don't want to throw any friends under the bus. I don't have his permission to mention his name, but he is a lawyer in the area. He was a police officer in California. You may know who this person is as I describe him. He's a police officer in California, grew up very reform. He's now a Skver Chassid, and he does criminal defense and traffic tickets.
All right, Peter, that was a great suggestion. I want to thank you for coming. It was a pleasure for us to have you here. And really, you educated us. And I feel like we grew in terms of our knowledge and understanding of how to keep ourselves safer.
Yeah. I have one more question. I'm sorry, Michael.
Please, go
I
for it.
apologize. This is a very important question.
Okay.
This might be the most important
Whoa.
question that we've covered till
How about
today.
you start the question and we end it with the next episode when he's back?
A cliffhanger.
Exactly.
Yeah, we asked the question and
Yeah,
then he has to
exactly.
come
I like
back
that
and
idea.
answer it.
Okay, go
No,
for
but
it.
this is going to help thousands of people. Like, there are going to be a lot of people that are going to be depending on this answer that you're going to give. Okay?
It's a lot of pressure.
You ready for this?
Yes.
Okay. Given that you've been in the court scene for a long time and you understand, how the nature of things work behind the scenes and all that, which TV show is the most accurate depiction of what really goes on? What TV show would you recommend somebody watch?
Look, no TV show is 100%
Of course not.
perfect, right? But Law and
Yeah.
Order.
Law and Order.
Yeah. Very depictive of what I used to do for a living.
So not Boston Legal?
Not Boston Legal.
Okay, that's my favorite.
What about Suits? What about the show Suits? You know Suits?
So I've watched it. Interesting, but
Everybody wants to be
I-
that guy.
right, of course. But you're asking me about what's reality versus wanting to be that guy.
Wow.
And the reality of it is, I think Law and Order.
So Law and Order is
Yeah.
actually an accurate depiction of
Yeah.
what goes on.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Very
interesting. Okay. Noted.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining for another wonderful episode. Thank you again for Prime Source for sponsoring. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Help us grow this podcast to the best that it can be. And that's a wrap.